everybody, welcome back. Guys, I want to do another series of videos on why are crossbow limbs breaking. Because it seems like every year, as much as I love these things, as much as I know you guys do too, it seems like every year we've got more and more limb issues out there. And I think there's a lot of different variables and a lot of things that could be going on. So that's why I want to break this up into a couple of videos. And today what we're going to talk about is what you are doing wrong or what you are inducing that is causing your crossbow to fail. Now, I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody or make you feel bad, but I just want you guys to be aware of there are lots of variables and you are one of them that can cause limb issues. And this is across all manufacturers. This is not just a single brand specific thing. I have seen limb issues on everything from 10 points to Ravens to Matthews to Killer Instinct to Barnett to Center Point to everyone. Every one of them has issues, some more than others, but a lot of it does have to do with user errors. And the very first thing, the number one thing, is just make sure you are doing proper bow maintenance, okay? Make sure you're waxing your strings. Make sure you get a good quality string wax. That stuff is not expensive. Even the expensive stuff, it's a pretty cheap investment with potentially a high return on investment. If you get a good quality string wax, good rail lube, and just make sure you're doing that at the frequency your manufacturer tells you to. And if you notice something, especially with your string or your cables or anything really with your bow that just seems a little off or seems like it's wearing, go take it into your local pro shop or your local dealer and have them check it out and make sure it doesn't create an even bigger issue. The second thing, and I don't think this happens quite as often as some of the other variables, but it's your limbs or your cams impacting something when you shoot your bow. If you're hunting from a blind or even a tree stand, a tree saddle is getting really popular. You gotta make sure you're aware of how wide your limbs are gonna be basically when it's decocked or after you fired that shot, okay? You might be able to squeeze your crossbow through a blind window or get really tight to a tree in your saddle or shooting back behind you in your tree stand. But you gotta make sure when that bow fires and those limbs spread out that your bow limbs, your cam, all that stuff is not gonna impact something because that obviously can cause your bow to blow up. The third thing, and I think this is a big one, is bumping. I don't even wanna say dropping because I think you guys would agree that if you drop your bow, even if it's okay right after dropping it, that's probably gonna create an issue. But I'm talking about really small, minor bumps, banging it into stuff, maybe even, I think a very common one, lowering it from your tree stand and just kind of having it knock around on stuff. So, I mean, if you look at these bows, this is a Killer Instinct SWAT X1. This is my main bow. I mean, these things are under a tremendous amount of load, your limbs are, and even preload in an uncocked state. I mean, these limbs, if they were coming out straight here, I mean, it's already got this much preload. When you cock it, this particular bow is only 6 inches wide, so there is a tremendous amount of load on these limbs, and it doesn't take much of a bump, a knock, a scrape, banging it into stuff to create a potential little micro fracture in that fiberglass in there. And it might not rear its ugly head as soon as it happens, but over time, as you cock and you shoot, that microfracture can just propagate and it can get bigger till when finally you have a limb failure. And those, I think that is a very common one as far as like a user error thing where something minute happens and we don't really realize it. And then our bow, we have a limb failure and we simply just blame it on, the manufacturer. Be careful with it, especially when it's in that cocked state, when it's got all of that load on those limbs. That scenario of lowering it down, you pull your bolt out, you lower it down from your tree stand, that is a very vulnerable state for your crossbow. So just take extra precautions when you're doing that. If you can discharge it from your tree stand, I know that's not ideal. I usually don't do that, but anything you can do to just make sure that in that moment or other moments when you are hunting or transporting your bow, going from tree stand to ground, make sure you are doing everything you can to limit any bumps, impacts to your crossbow limbs. All right, you guys, and the fourth thing on how your crossbow limbs can break really doesn't have anything to do with your crossbow at all. It has to do with your bolt. So making sure this is 100% damage defect free before every single shot is critical. And I think this is a big leading cause to why a lot of not only limb issues, but just crossbows breaking, strings breaking in general happen. So first things first, if your manufacturer requires you to shoot a specific bolt, you gotta shoot it. I know sometimes that's a pain in the butt. I personally don't like that, but if that's what you know going into buying that crossbow, that you're gonna have to shoot a particular bolt, you just gotta do it. And you gotta make sure you shoot the nock type. If you need a specific nock, you gotta shoot that too with your crossbow, okay? Shooting the wrong nock can cause a lot of issues. The list of things I have here basically all lead to potential dry fire scenarios. So shooting the wrong bolt or shooting the wrong nock can cause either damage to the bolt, damage to the nock during firing, or it can cause your string to jump your bolt. And that creates basically a dry fire scenario, which, as you guys know, if you dry fire a crossbow, things are gonna break. The other thing is just making sure that your nock is not damaged. So even if you're shooting all the right stuff, make sure that that nock, and honestly your bolt as well, this back end of your bolt is not damaged before each shot. So a few ways that these can get damaged. One is shooting groups. Crossbows are super accurate, especially at, kind of traditional bow hunting ranges of 40 yards and in. You really should not shoot at the same dot with a whole bunch of your bolts, because even if you don't Robin Hood one, you might sit there and kind of bang them together a little bit, or the tip of a point might just graze across one of your bolts. That can be enough to create, again, another just little micro crack or a little bit of damage that, the next shot maybe isn't a big deal, but a few shots down the road, it could lead to a problem. And even if you're not shooting groups, just check those things. Check your nocks, check the back end of your bolt, and especially check lighted nocks. I don't exactly know what material lighted nocks are made out of, but just being that clear material with that LED in the middle of them, they are definitely more susceptible to wear and damage than traditional nocks. And finally, let's say everything with your bolt is perfectly fine. There's no damage. You are good to go. You're not shooting groups or anything like that. Make sure your bolt is fully seated against your string. I think that is a big, big issue sometimes, where if it's not fully seated and you can get away with a little bit of space between basically your nock and that string and be able to take your safety off and fire that crossbow. And if you do, you're turning what needs to be 100% a push force. You want that string to be contacting your nock, your bolt, and be pushing it the entire time. If you've got just even a little bit of space there, that 100% push force turns into an impact force. And when you hit that bolt with all of that, energy that your crossbow has stored up, even a perfectly brand new, fine, defect, damage-free bolt and nock setup, it can break. You guys really make sure, if you're a crossbow hunter, crossbow shooter, whether you're a new crossbow hunter or a veteran, make sure you're just kind of giving yourself a self-assessment of making sure you've got everything that you are in control of dialed in before you take each shot, before you go on each hunt, to just limit or help prevent these limb issues that we keep seeing, you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, do me a favor, drop a like down below, and definitely drop a comment if you guys got any other tips or pointers of things that you could do, I could do, all of us crossbow hunters could do. Please drop it down below. And you guys, the next video on why are crossbow limbs breaking, we're gonna tackle some more bolt weight related stuff. So be sure to check that out when it comes out. And thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember, be a sportsman, make a sportsman.